Welcome to another episode of Innovation Minutes Live. I am Dan, and I'm joined here by my co-host Anna. Today we
Hello.
are talking about bailing, flaking, and ghosting. I would call it the Cerberus of modern communication, whether that's personal or in your work life or in your relationship. This is kind of something that's permeated into all facets of our lives, and we're going to talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, and this is something that I've written about and been interviewed about from a sort of sociological perspective, and it's also something that it's also something that in like for instance in the last 2 weeks, I have been personally bailed, flaked, or ghosted on 4 times in
Yeah.
2 weeks. And I find that to be a phenomenal number, and a number that not so long ago you would not find. So this is a significant shift in our cultural landscape. And I think also sometimes people think it's limited to personal and social interactions when in fact it's happening increasingly more in a professional context. And
Yeah.
I think we want to talk about, what's the significance of that.
Yeah, and we've talked about this multiple times, in both contexts actually, and I don't know, I would have to say it probably started in people's personal lives culturally, and then
Yeah.
kind of worked its way into the workplace as it became more accepted on the personal side, which is not a good thing, but it's definitely made itself more commonplace in the workplace. And I think we've also read and discussed about articles that have put a little bit of the blame on technology.
Yeah.
And I don't know if technology is 100% to blame, but I definitely think with the rise of email as
Yeah.
the main communication mechanism within large companies, at least, it's definitely allowed people to. It's given people a way, just because of the way that email works, where you send somebody an email, there's an accepted or unaccepted amount of time that's unspoken where they can then respond. That allows it allows conversations and communications to go on longer and longer periods of time between responses. And that in a way can easily lend itself to to a breakdown in communication. And that's really what it is.
Yeah, and I think, when we become overloaded, something has to fall off. We can't possibly keep up with all the pings and the alerts. And sometimes it becomes difficult to distinguish between, whatever social media alert you're receiving that comes with the same level of urgency as the professional email in your inbox. And our brains don't always parse the two out. It only knows that it can only has the bandwidth for so much.
Right.
And so as the spheres between our professional and personal lives become increasingly blurred, I think we see this creeping into the professional realm even more. And
Yeah.
it has to do with, to a certain extent, inefficiencies, because technology in many ways makes us exponentially more efficient. But when there's a constant banter, when there's constant distraction, then all of technology seems to erode our capability for efficiency.
Yeah, and I also have to wonder if part of it isn't our expectations, and I'm not saying that that's the case, but maybe, just maybe, the fact that we're so accustomed to almost all communication now being instant
Yeah.
that whenever there's any kind of delay, we perceive that as a slight, right? So
Mm.
maybe it could have been before email that when you send a letter to somebody about doing business together, you wouldn't hear back for several weeks. And so maybe when you send an email now and you don't hear back from whoever it is that you sent that to for several weeks, maybe it's just our perceptions changed.
Well, I think there's that, but then by that same token, when you did receive communication from someone, I think it was far less acceptable to simply not respond. And, and so now there's this abundance, and there's this general perspective that it's okay to not respond because the person's busy, and you know, I can tell you that in both a personal and professional perspective that it isn't always that they just haven't gotten around to it yet. There's a huge percentage of the time when there's going to be no response. And you know, one of the things I actually talk about in my book is that if you really are wanting to save time, if you really are wanting to be more efficient, then you will respond to all of the personalized correspondence, but you'll respond to it in a way that is very clear about what your expectations are and what you're able to offer and when. And that shuts it down, because otherwise you're basically leaving the person dangling sort of to pursue you, and we like to feel pursued. And so, you know, they're gonna continue to send you emails that you're probably going to read, and that wastes everyone's time. So, you know, if efficiency or busyness is the actual excuse, it doesn't really hold up over the long term.
Well, I think what's happened is technology has advanced to the point where there no longer is an excuse, right? We've gotten, it's made us more efficient. It's made us more productive. It's given us these very easy ways to quickly communicate with people, whether that's instant messaging or Slack or text or whatever it is, so that you don't have to sit there and write a lengthy email to somebody. You can quickly send them something, anything. And, you know, I think probably what's happening is you know, like we talked about last week with these generational shifts, the way that we use technology, you know, as a culture, and even within these subdivided generations, it's very different, right? The generation that came before us uses it in a different way, and before them, and so on. So now we have this cross-generational communication happening over all these different new technology platforms and mediums that have come about. And I think we're all still a little bit learning how to deal with all that.
I mean, it almost boils down, as in most things in life, to aligning expectations.
Yeah.
If there's aligned expectations, everything is just clearer, and there's less communication. There's not as much misunderstanding, and even when it falls short, even when the response, I think most people would agree, when the response is not what you were hoping for, you're still grateful to have that point of contact and that clarity. And I think that's the thing that people don't always realize. I think more often than not, someone is more likely to bail, to flake, to ghost someone in particular, to save their own honesty. You know, they don't want to be honest about it and expose themselves.
Anybody else down, sure.
Exactly. Yeah. And so it's less about the other person. And so I think if you just own whatever it is and you're clear about it, people will be grateful. And if you have a pattern of doing that, you know, then people are going to know if they want to invest in you, either on a personal level or professionally, because there is a tipping point for that.
Yeah.
Those are the repercussions. So yeah, we would like to know, you know, is this something that you're experiencing in your life professionally, personally? Do you see the two overlapping? And how have you personally combated it in terms of stopping it, or have you? And what do you do when you find that you're being flaked on, bailed, or ghosted? We'd love to hear that. So join us in the comments and leave us your feedback.
Yep, and we'll see you next week.